So we've got two really good friends of mine joining. I am very excited to spend this Friday afternoon with you guys. So Reagan Pugh from Assemble and Dustin Betz from the Founder Institute. So yeah, this is going to be a joy, guys. Thank you for joining and taking some time out of your busy schedules. I know you all have a lot going on. So to kick things off a little bit, would love for each of you just to take a couple minutes and share who are you, what work are you bringing into the world through whatever organizations you're a part of, and then just give us a tiny teaser of how things are starting to look different for you, given the new COVID-19 reality. But we will have plenty more time to dive into that after the breakout room. So a little teaser just to kind of get us thinking should be good. So I'm going to pass things off to Reagan to kick things off. So where are you calling in from? Give us a little overview of who you are.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Spud, for organizing this and always for being a wonderful convener of people. Hey, guys, thanks for making time on a Friday afternoon. I don't take it lightly that you're here. I'm calling in from Austin, Texas, where I've been living and working for almost a decade now. And most of the work is rooted in education. I started as a high school teacher, moved on to teaching and designing college classes, then moved into adult training and professional development. About 3 years ago, I started my own firm with a couple of colleagues called Assemble, where we got a little bit into the social entrepreneurship space by helping a co-working space called Impact Hub here in Austin build a social impact accelerator that we ran a few dozen businesses through. And right now, the focus for me is around personal development and transformation. And I've spent the most of the last year keynote speaking, writing, and creating workshops for teams who want to build their own professional development materials. So a lot of focus on the inner work the last year. And man, my biggest client this year, we had stuff planned through November for me to come in and create custom workshops for the way that their employees are growing in their self-awareness. And they pretty much canceled everything all the way through November already, just to say, hey, if and when we do come back in the midsummer, late summer, it's not going to be a priority for us to do what we're going to do with you. So right now I have no foreseeable paycheck after I got one in the mail last week, and I'm trying to figure out what to do next. I tell you a preview of the thoughts I'm thinking are around this. A lot of times we can understand what we need to offer people because they clearly understand their problem and their challenges. Right now, though, people have no clarity on what their problem or their challenge is. And if it's one thing this week, it might be different next week. So what does it look like for us, not only to help people create solutions to problems, but maybe to know what their problems are in the first place?
Cool. Thanks for that little cliffhanger of a conversation starter. So, Dustin, why don't you share a little bit where you're calling in from? What's some of the work you do in the world?
Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for everybody for taking some time on your Friday. Also very appreciative. My name is Dustin Betz. I'm the head of content at the Founder Institute. We are a global pre-seed accelerator. So we are the largest, I guess we run maybe more startup events all over the world than almost any other organization. So it's free startup events for early stage entrepreneurs. And then we also run an accelerator program, and we've run in over 180 cities and 60 countries. And my job at the Founder Institute is the head of content. So I basically am our blog editor. The blog is fi.co/insights. We have a newsletter. But basically, my role is to help tell stories from within the Founder Institute network. We have over 4,000 portfolio companies. We've been in accelerating businesses for 10 years. And so some of them are really big, most of them are really, really small. And my job, I kind of see it, is to help them with their storytelling, help them hone their message, and hopefully win some earned media out of just little interviews that I do with them, or covering them, through our blog or what have you, in different ways that we feature them in our social media. So yeah, elevating the stories that are really resonating from within our network is sort of like my job as a content curator at the Founder Institute. And yeah, like I mentioned, I guess what's changing most for me personally, I failed to mention I'm calling from San Francisco. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I've been in the Bay Area about 2 years. But we run startup events all over the world. And we were pretty far ahead of this, I think, around, 6 weeks ago. We probably started realizing like we're delaying events, we're going to start canceling events, and we're basically reimagining our entire business to try to run online events that deliver some of the same value that people get from in-person ones, which, as we all know, it's hard to do. So our business is changing in pretty significant ways, and yeah, it's been a thrill ride, not
Going
always
on,
fun.
guys?
Yeah, keeping me busy though.
Awesome. Well, thank you for jumping in, giving us a little teaser of what you got going on. We've got Dustin and Reagan here with us. What I want to do is send us into some really quick breakout rooms so you guys have a chance to talk a little bit before we jump back into some Q&A. So what I would love to do is frame this question for everybody. As we're thinking about COVID-19, I'd love for you guys to talk in small groups of 3 to 4 people around what part of yourself are you hoping stretches as a result of everything that we're going through right now, right? So thinking about the personal dimension of this, what are you hoping stretches? How do we be more intentional about that? So take some time in, again, small groups of 3 or 4, just to unpack that. What part of yourself do you hope stretches as a result of COVID-19? To kind of kick us off, what I would love to dive into as a starting point and hear from Reagan and Dustin is you each shared a little bit of, Reagan, you were talking about a bunch of your jobs and gig opportunities just kind of disappeared suddenly. And Dustin, you were mentioning a little bit that your organization sort of saw this coming. And so I wonder if you could bring us to the personal moment. Describe to us where you were when you heard the news of what was going on, right? When it really started to sink in with how it was impacting you. And just bring us to that moment. How are you processing that? Did you go on a walk? Did you just kind of sit and freak out in the corner? I'm curious, as leaders of these different organizations, what was the personal experience like for each of you?
I can go first. I don't know if mine's like the most revealing. Maybe it was when I showed up in our office on a Monday and there was nobody there. Somebody had slacked over the weekend. People had started to consider, this was the first week of March. And yeah, I showed up on Monday. Over the weekend, somebody had slacked, you can stay home. We're going to institute the policy of like, let's just go fully remote from HQ as well. Yeah. And there was like one other person in the office that day. And that was the last, I haven't been back in a month almost now. Right. So, that hit for me, I guess, once I went on lockdown, myself, which was fairly early. And like I said, we had been watching coronavirus kind of spread for a few weeks prior, like as a company. But that was when it really hit home, was when it was me personally.
I hear that, man. Mine was this client that I was doing workshops with them through November. I'd done like a keynote presentation at their big company conference in February. And then we launched the first series of workshops in early March, 4 full days worth of workshops. And we were 2 days in to the workshops and they were going really, really well. Like we were getting survey feedback at how awesome they were going. And then the second day, right before the last session, the VP of HR sat me down and she was like, hey, we're not going to finish the workshops this week. Can you video yourself doing this in your house? And then everything else is on hold indefinitely. So I remember, I was in her office and I like tried to fumble my way through, all of the buzzwords like pivot that I could in the moment. And like, let's reimagine what we might. And I remember sitting in the car in the parking lot and being like, well, there goes like all my money this year. What am I going to do? So I think I took the long way home. I drove around and I think I took a week off. I took about a week to just like read and slow down when my calendar cleared. Yeah.
So one of the questions in here that I want to build off, given what you're just sharing there, is right, what skills do we need to use to stay focused on productivity in this? And I think one of the challenges, at least from my perspective, right, has been there are times when I want to be productive and yet I just can't bring myself to do it. And so have there been skills or tips or tricks that you're bringing from your, entrepreneurial, independent freelance contractor perspective that has been helpful in thinking about how do we be productive in a time like this? And what does productivity mean in a time like this, right? Like perhaps it's shifting the definition of that. So that idea of productivity and what skills are needed in this time, I'm wondering if you guys could touch on that at all.
Yeah, I think I can touch on productivity sort of. I mean, one sort of positive, potential silver lining, I think, is I mentioned with Spud before the call started. I recently saw an interview with Stuart Butterfield, the CEO of Slack, and he was just talking about how his organization, which has been run as a remote organization from the very beginning, institutes policies. So he can speak to that with much, much greater kind of depth than I can. But the gist and short of it is that having an organization that's really driven by goals and not so much on punching the clock, I guess. So really being an organization, whether you're using Asana or some kind of task-based management system, but giving people the discretion to be able to manage their own time and their own productivity. If they're a night owl and that's how they work, I think that organizations that are successful are going to be the ones that give really talented people the freedom to be able to work in ways that work for them. And so, yeah, I think it'll be a lot more organizations that become partially or fully remote after this. And that's like a best practice is, not monitoring people's time so much as their actual output and what they're achieving.
That's a good word, man. I need to watch that interview. I know as I think about productivity, I can't help but think that productivity for most of us probably needs to be redefined. Over the course of the last 2 weeks, I found myself carrying things from my pre-corona to-do list to my post-corona to-do list. And sometimes if I'm being really reflective that day, I'll realize, actually, although I did place a lot of importance on this, getting it done is actually in the new environment not going to yield me any positive results. So whether that be like responding to that person on email or like reaching out to that potential client, like I've been able to shave a significant amount of things off of my plate, which has allowed me to then focus on things that might actually be more important for me to do, thus making me more productive in the moment. To stay focused on productivity, like brass tacks, I've had to use a Pomodoro app really hard the last 3 or 4 weeks. So Pomodoros are really short sprints of focused time, normally 25 minutes. And man, I have an app on my phone and I'm clocking 4, 5, 6 hours a day on that. And that's really helped me stay productive. I'm also trying to insert short, high intensity interval exercises between large tasks inside to keep me going. Those are a couple of things just off the top of my head that I've tried to put into place right now.
Cool. I want to open the floor to others on the call that if at any point there's something that is sparked that is said that you want to piggyback on and ask a follow-up question, feel free to just unmute yourself and abruptly interrupt me. So that is totally allowed. But one thing I want to build on that is because so many people are having a different experience to this, right? So some folks need to pivot suddenly and are in this kind of creative headspace. Others are sort of in a bit of an anxiety, a bit of a grief space, right? There's a sadness to what's going on. There's a question in here talking about, right, how do we shift equilibrium, right? And so this idea of equilibrium is really interesting right now that I find myself personally like fluctuating back and forth between it on a daily, if not hourly basis. And so that question particularly was around how do we use this energy to create a shift in the social and economic equilibrium? And I want to add another layer to that question is how do we empathize with people who are navigating this very differently than ourselves? Because everybody is having such a different experience at this time. And right, you both can give us a really, I think, important insight into your world, but everybody's world looks so different. So right, as we're thinking about shifting equilibriums in a time like this, how do we build that empathy for folks who are navigating it differently than we are? I see a smile on Reagan's face. I'm not sure what that means, but.
I published a blog yesterday titled Empathy in the Time of Corona. and the tagline is a guide to understanding where other people are coming from for the non-empath. I'm personally, and I say this with all respect, I personally am coming from a place where I'm not attaching myself too much to the news headlines, and so it's been hard for me to walk alongside my girlfriend who's feeling really alone right now because I'm not sharing the same experience with her. She's a former nurse, and a lot of her friends are really affected by this. And Spud just did a great job of recognizing the different experiences that people are having. And at the beginning of this, I believed that empathy was supposed to be a feeling that I wanted to feel. And after some reflection over the last couple of weeks, I've realized that if it's not coming to me naturally, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm defective or that I'm wrong or that I'm mean-spirited. We just have to remember that empathy is an action. And what we need more than anything right now is connection and to feel seen, regardless of what our experience is. So, whereas 3 weeks ago, I was not understanding why people's experience was different than mine, and I'm trying to evolve to a place where I realize that it's not necessarily useful for me to wonder why someone's experience is different than mine. Perhaps what's more useful is to connect, even if I don't know why I should.
Yeah, I love that. I want to piggyback on that because the thing that comes to mind for me is sort of, connecting with somebody. And if that's your customer, so this is more specifically, I guess, speaking to kind of the business side of it, it's like using empathy as a really powerful tool in your customer development toolkit as you might think about how your business is going to change. And I think that, you know, at their core, really good entrepreneurs are problem solvers. And so it's really about reaching where empathy comes in is really understanding your customer. And now might be a time where your customer is also in panic in some way. And so reaching out with them and trying to empathize with the problems that they're experiencing, those are the opportunities for the social entrepreneur to solve the problem, is to have your customer dictate what the problem is. Because there are a lot of ramifications, side effects, all kinds of things in the economy that are going to change, and those are opportunities for people who are looking for them. Yeah.
So building on that, this idea of building empathy with others, whether it be our customers, whether it be people experiencing this in a very different way, my question to you is, have you seen really great examples of how folks are doing that? How they are communicating with either a customer group or somebody who's processing it differently? And I'll share one personal story as you're thinking about that. I've been posting a lot this week about some of the grant opportunities that exist for small businesses. And I'm sharing details of how to calculate how much your loan's going to be and how much can get forgiven and all the math and the steps that you need to do for the application. And someone reached out to me and said, well, I actually don't even know how to reach out to my banker, right? The step that I totally overlooked, right, of like, how do I even build a communication structure with somebody that I don't have a contact with, right? How do I just reach out and have empathy with where they're coming from and them have empathy for me? How do I build that trust? And so it was this piece that I really had overlooked before. And so I'm curious for you all, what examples have you seen about how folks are reaching out, doing that communication to build empathy in a really meaningful way?
Yeah, I think like my initial thought is you don't need permission to reach out to your customer, and sort of like permission is implicitly granted right now because everybody is experiencing some kind of turmoil. And so if you're somebody like me personally, who is somebody who's more introverted and maybe doesn't always reach out to people, this is more on the personal side, but the same thing can happen in a business. It's like, these connections, maybe customers who were past customers or they haven't bought from you in a while. I mean, the time right now, you don't need permission to reach out because everybody's experiences are shifting. and everybody is going to be able to give you input and feedback that's different than maybe the last time you spoke to them about their challenges. And everybody's sitting at home waiting for you to call them too, or I mean, maybe they have a lot of Zoom meetings also, but you also know that people are generally available, and they're available to give that feedback, I think.
Dustin, I'd be interested in your thoughts. So when I hear that, and this could very well reveal some of my own insecurities about feeling like I'm bothering people. But I feel like there's a kind of a continuum. On one end or a spectrum. On one end is trendy, like what's hot right now. And then on the other end is timeless. And generally, like I kind of want to find myself, somewhere maybe toward the timeless and not necessarily the trendy. And I know that I've experienced some interactions with people that I do business with that kind of almost feels like ambulance chasing, like them really taking advantage of what's going down. So what are your thoughts on how to do that better?
Do you mind explaining like the ambulance chasing aspect of what you just said some more?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain the ambulance chasing aspect?
Yes, thanks.
Buzzwords and terms and everything.
Yes, Izzy, thank you for calling me out on that. Ambulance chasing meaning like sometimes there's lawyers that like as soon as they see an accident, they're going to chase that ambulance, and they get a reputation for being people that are only there in the case of emergency, and they really don't care about what's going on.
So in what ways have you experienced that?
Yeah, so some brands that I work with, or some companies that I've bought from, like within 24 hours of all this stuff going down, I'm getting emails about like, we've pivoted our offerings to be a COVID-19 friendly organization, and it's like, yo, can you give it a second? And it's like, man, a little too eager. You know what I mean? And are you using this because are you really trying to help fix this, or are you seeing this as an opportunity to sell to me?
So we're basically talking about the ones that are picking the bones after everything is, after the crisis has come. They're like, hey, we're here to help. But really what they're trying to do is take advantage of our situation, take advantage of our insecurities at the moment.
Right.
It was interesting because I saw a commercial for, I think it was Cottonelle or something. And they're like, share the square. We're donating to people who really need it and all these things. And the marketing side of my brain was like, wow, they're really like tackling this. This is great. And then the other part of me was just like, it's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be, I think there's always going to be people who are opportunistic, but it's really, up to the discriminating consumer and the discriminating customer, right? To be able to really look at, is this just some PR spin, or like, have they legitimately pivoted, and are they offering me value? And I think if you feel like, somebody's trying to sell to you, I mean, it's hard to say like through a MailChimp, a drip email campaign, that you're going to feel that kind of empathetic connection. But say somebody called you and they are trying to, sell you something, you can tell if somebody's being empathetic and if they're really trying to suss out like, what are your problems, versus I have this new canned offering with like the hashtag COVID-19 that I'm trying to offer you. So I do kind of think it's up to individuals, whether consumers or as business people, to kind of suss that out. But there's no doubt about it that, it's tax season too, or at least it was before it got delayed. And that's when you get all these other kind of like spammy offers also start coming up. So opportunistics, vultures end up circling around things. And there's no doubt that there's a lot out right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I also noticed that definitely there are several advertisements that emerged from this whole coronavirus, and it was just impressive to see how fast they reacted and how fast they came up with something new to tackle that. And it's questionable if they really mean it or if they see the opportunity, and how is it going forward when this is over, hopefully soon. So are they continuing, or they disappear again from the picture?
Yeah, I want to build a question on top of that, because for both Dustin and Reagan, the organizations or groups that you're a part of, how are you balancing this idea of, do I pivot, right? Reagan, you do in-person event facilitation. Dustin, you guys do in-person gatherings. Like, how do you balance, I need to pivot to the reality of what today is, given this whole new reality, versus, you know, we need to stay true to who we are and like know that things are going to pass. Like, how are you balancing that scale of responding to the urgency of having to pivot suddenly and this pressure that everybody else is, versus stay true, figure out how we, you know, weather it out of this storm?
That's a toughie. It's a toughie. I can tell you we are moving really, really fast. So, I mean, yeah, we run startup events all over the world for early stage founders, and we are building new tech. We have a really, really small tech team, and we're just trying to hustle, honestly, as hard as we can to bring those offerings online. And we know that the value is not going to be exactly the same as the in-person events. Like, some aspects might be better. Many aspects will probably suffer some, but we're going to try to create the same value that, you know, our network has gotten from the Founder Institute and recreated online. And then we're going to preserve everything else in the background, I guess, right? Like, the hope is that this doesn't, it's not going to last forever. The hope is that it won't be too long, and then the world will eventually come out of this. And yeah, it'll be different. I think, like, if provided we do come out the other end, you know, we're all fine, then I think probably we'll run a lot more online events, and this will end up being supplementing the kind of in-person events that we also run. So yeah, I don't know, but from the Founder Institute's perspective as an organization, there wasn't much hesitation in like, we know we have to change quickly, and building processes. We've been just working hard to make it happen. And everybody's been on a lot of hours. So yeah, it's we didn't wait and really think that much, but I liked the way that Reagan, you described like the trend versus like the what was the other opposite side of that, the part of you that's very constant, and you don't want to lose touch with that, but you gotta move fast when you gotta move fast.
Hear that, and man, so much of me wishes that I had a little bit more hustle when it comes to things like this. But I think at the same time I assume you guys are on this call because you want to create some sort of difference or change in the world. And I can tell you that in order to do that, there is going to need to be a lot of hustle, but then there's also going to need to be a connection with what is authentically you. And that has to be a part of the fabric of whatever you create. So I spent a few days being mad at myself for not being the guy that pivoted and immediately changed my offerings and had a new webinar. But then I paused and had a little bit of grace on myself to realize that the offerings that I bring to my people and the people in my audience, they know that my blogs are not quick listicles with a few quick tips. They know that my blogs are long form blogs. They know that the work that we do is self-awareness, so it takes a little bit longer. So the identity of what I'm bringing to the market before Corona, I'm starting to see is kind of the identity that I'm bringing after. And although I do need money in the bank pretty dang quick, it's not bad for me to move at a pace that my audience is accustomed to. Now that said, so what do we really get whenever I get to facilitate a room or when I get to do a keynote speech? What we get is an experience where we all feel connected to an idea that tells us something true about ourselves and our experience with life. That's what we get to do when we're in person. And the good news is we've been watching movies our whole lives. We've been watching Netflix shows. And in that, we experience connection to an idea that tells us something true about ourselves or our experience with life. So on the large scale, in my work of facilitating and speaking, we're not necessarily losing the opportunity to do that. We're just losing an element of it. And so I don't know what to do with that idea next, but I think that there are a few ways that we can feel connection that is missing by we're missing being together in person and to hug and touch one another. So since we can't do those things, what are 2 or 3 other things that we're not doing right now virtually that might satisfy those needs that we feel in in-person gatherings? That's a big question I have.
I love that idea though of getting clarity on what you were known for prior to Corona and what you are known for after. I mean, I think that's a great exercise, whether you're in an entrepreneurial space and have a product or service to sell, or just personally, right? Like, I love the quote, you're the average of the 5 people around you, and like thinking about what do they know of you, right? If they had to describe you. And so how would those 5 people describe you prior to Corona and after, in terms of what they're seeing as your response and the way you're serving your communities or getting out there and communicating with people? Yeah, I think that's a great just personal exercise probably to do, getting clarity on that. Curious for others, what other questions or thoughts do you guys have that you want to throw into the middle? I see a mouth opening over there, LDR.
One thing that I found interesting about what he said was it came down to when we were talking about you're the average of the 5 people around you, and how you are before Corona and how you are after Corona. I find that very interesting because one of the things that I have always told friends, family, coworkers, whoever I'm around, because I do a lot of talking in my everyday life and in the things that I do, because if I'm not doing spoken word, if I'm not working in customer service, I'm also a minister at a church. And what we don't do at this moment are have in-person services, at least because of the Corona and everything that's been happening. And if y'all didn't know where I'm located in Nashville, Tennessee, that got hit by a tornado 2 weeks before Corona happened. One thing that we keep saying is Nashville strong. One thing we keep saying is we believe in Nashville. And another thing we keep saying is we're going to keep moving no matter what. And the biggest thing about that is I feel like perseverance is a skill that we all need to have at this point. Perseverance and patience, because it's not going to be fixed overnight, but we got to know that we still have to have the hope to go on for another day. If we allow ourselves to fall into that hole, you know, that pit where you're thinking, okay, I can't do this anymore. Like you said, you have to figure out who you are and how your product can adapt. Adaptability is the biggest skill that all of us have to need, because the climate changes all the time. And whether we're online, whether we're in person, I feel like that I'm glad that I have people around me, including the people that are in this call, people around me that actually understand that we can't stop just because this happened. The world doesn't stop moving because of some crisis that has happened. We just have to adapt to how the world is going to work now. And I really feel like that. That is something that everybody just needs to hear. That you can't stop. You just got to keep moving.
Yep. I'm curious, you mentioned a whole bunch of qualities in there, right? Adaptability, perseverance, patience. I'm curious for Reagan and Dustin, have you guys seen, right, how do you make that not a buzzword? How do you not make that, you know, a list of qualities that I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a change maker, right? So I need to be patient. I need to have perseverance. Have you seen examples, maybe in light of the coronavirus, about how those qualities are really playing themselves out in practical ways that you've been impressed by or inspired by other leaders or companies?
Yeah, really cool. I mean, just within our organization, and this kind of goes back to the empathy thing we were talking about, I think checking in with people, I've actually had my manager and our CEO multiple times, like, check in with me personally, which is, you know, they've done that before in the past as well, but it's a really simple and powerful way that you don't have to be in the same room as somebody to check in. Hey, how are you doing personally? Not any of the projects you're working on, like, how are you holding up? And I mean, that's a really genuine way to express that. And I've felt it from within our organization. And I think you can certainly do it outside your organization in the same way you can use empathy to reach out and genuinely approach your customers and ask them what kind of problems they're having. It doesn't have to be problems related to their business, like, you know, trying to connect with them as people.
I dig one layer deeper into that. And this is not to, like, you don't have to spill the inner workings of your organization, But do you feel like with COVID that your team is checking in with one another more so than they were prior? Like, is this exposing people of like, oh, we never did that, and now I'm realizing that we should? Or was it just a part of your company culture prior to that, and it's just moved into the virtual space versus in-person check-ins?
No, it's been newer, and it's kind of been an emergence, at least a pickup in how much people have reached out to me to check in. And I don't know, if you want to look inside an organization, even a really tiny one like ours, I mean, well, 20 people is kind of, it's bigger than some organizations, and so we are able to move quickly because we have 20 people, but it's smaller in some ways. But it really shows an element of leadership when those are the people who are reaching out to you to say, hey, are you doing okay? Like that tells me that they actually are leaders. So.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Kind of going off of that, Dustin, like, I think it's this like string of like, we're all sort of in the same place that makes it very easy for those questions to be asked. Like, you can say, how are you doing right now? And it's a very clear, like, how are you doing quarantine? How are you doing? Like, just in general. And I think like when you run into somebody on like a pre-COVID day, you'd say like, you know, how are you? And the expectation is just that they say, I'm good, I'm doing well, I'm fine. Maybe they're a little tired or something like that, but it's not really kind of like getting into that deeper level. And so how do you sort of like, if you're outside of, you know, after post COVID, how do you continue to like create how do you ask questions, I guess, to like see how people are on a personal level that is meaningful and like easily expressible? I don't know.
Great question.
Yes.
You want to give it a stab, Reagan?
Yeah, I just want to bask in the glory of Izzy's comment. I think, connection's going to look completely different. And, you know, I'm already kind of pre-lamenting something, and I shouldn't do that. I should just celebrate what's happening now. But what I'm pre-lamenting is the fact that once we're not quarantined anymore and things go back to quasi-normal, everyone's going to forget how much we wanted to connect pretty soon. I hope, though, that we figure out and our communities figure out a way to remember the beauty of human connection in this season, so that we have a lens when having conversations like you just mentioned for how am I going to really find out how this person's doing? Because there was a season in my life where that was the biggest gift of my entire day. How do we keep that going? Man, I want to know. I thought on adaptability, my business coach, man, I just totally lost that thought. I totally, completely lost it. So come back to me. Any other thoughts?
We'll have patience with you on that one.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will say, so one of my favorite questions related to checking in and just knowing how someone's holding up, I think I may have asked this to Dustin in the past, he knows me well, is kind of a bizarre question, but you ask somebody, if you were a boat, what's the status of your boat right now? And it is a bizarre question, and all of you kind of like lean back for a second when you hear it, but it is so good at getting people to actually check in about how they're doing, right? It's like, hey, does your boat have a hole in it? And what is that hole, right? Is it heading away from shore? Is it trying to come to shore? Are there people in your boat? Anyway, it's a good question to help people think about how are you doing, right? And actually get to a layer deeper than good, right? Okay. So I'll gift that out as one tool to take from this call.
That's so funny. I always use the analogy of the struggle bus. Like, I can't get off the struggle bus. The struggle bus has now crashed. It's rolling and burning down the hill. Like, where are you on the struggle bus? Are you I hope everybody's getting off on the next stop, sort of thing. So I thought that's funny.
Totally.
I like to use the workout analogy. Are you in the beginning? Are you warming up? Are you in the midst? Are you struggling with your set? Are you really pumping through it? Or are you cooling down off of your set?
Totally. I'm loving this. We should just mastermind session here and come up with all kinds of great questions and share them out to the world.
I love it because my answer was such a good question, but my answer was like, well, maybe you're gonna have to ask more explicitly. And I love that, like, the response is like, it's more kind of metaphorical to like get you to think. Like it's not, it's such an insightful question. And I think it's really, really important. But yeah, I love that my initial thoughts is like, well, you're gonna have to be really explicit. Like, how are you doing personally? Like, really spell it out. But no, I think the boat analogy and some of these others, yeah, they get to that. So that's creative. Yeah, that we should mastermind more.
Yeah, with the boat, I think, is it a crow's nest day? Like, am I looking way out? Is it, am I working the sails, or am I on the rudder? You know, like, where am I at on all those? That's good.
I should have gave that question at the beginning of our call, because we could probably spend another hour seeing how everybody's boat's personally doing. But I do want to be mindful of time. And so I want to leave us with one final question. Reagan, Dustin, how can we support you? As folks on this call, as folks in the Sullivan Network that are watching this video later on, what is one thing that we can share, do, read, support in some way for you? Or if you have nothing, what's a tip that you can leave for us?
Well, we are running, as I mentioned, a lot of new online startup events. And so, you know, I would just, the URL is onlinestartupevents.com. Bought that for $10 a couple of weeks ago. So there's all of our new webinars are up on there. And yeah, we would love to see some of you guys join some of our other events. They're very topical. There's 2 global webinars next week, and we'll be continuing to post more. So yeah, just visit onlinestartupevents.com and check out the Founder Institute that way.
See, man, pivot, buying URLs. Like, I want to be the guy that buys a new URL every time something goes down. That's how I want to be. So I would love it. First thing, Spud, that's a very kind question. I love the Sullivan Network. Basically, I want to hear how you guys are doing, because I don't want to chase ambulances, and I really want to understand what people are going through in their own personal development. So this is my blog, reaganpugh.com/writing. The most recent post is about empathy in the time of Corona. I'd love it if you read that. Tell me what you thought. But more than that, I'd love it if while you're on my website, you can see my contact. Shoot me an email about what your internal journey is looking like right now, because I'm curious as to what are the inner battles people are fighting, and what kind of writing can I create, or what kind of personal development do people need right now to make it through. That would be really helpful.
Awesome. I love that. 2 very concrete links there right at the end. I just want to thank everybody for joining on this call. Thank you, Reagan and Dustin, for spending some time with us and sharing what's going on. To our earlier conversation, I think Dustin shared that permission is granted, and the fact that everybody is now open for communication. I'm going to invite anybody to reach out to either Dustin or Reagan in any capacity, right? Go to their websites, find them on social media, follow up with them, share what you think. And if these calls are life-giving for you, feel free to join us. Again, we've got calls every Wednesday and Friday, so we'll be doing this again next week, and would love to have you guys join again. So thanks again for taking some time out of your Friday, and hopefully see you next week.